Welcome to the Nutritious and Delicious podcast. I'm your host, Bethany, and I've been in the health and wellness space for over 17 years. As a previous health nurse and now certified holistic nutritional consultant, I help clients with their hormone health, fertility, and family health. Join us on this journey as we connect with experts from around the globe, sharing insights and personal stories along the way. So today I'm here with Becky. So welcome, Becky.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so we have a great topic here today. So Becky Ackerman is a fertility coach, and she helps women feel calm, confident, and in control as they navigate their fertility journeys. And she's also been a fertility survivor herself. So welcome.
Thanks. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I'm
This
excited to talk about this with you today.
Yeah, this is a great topic. So today's topic is all about how stress impacts our fertility. So I would love for you, Becky, to tell us kind of how you got started in the big world of fertility and kind of what got you sort of in this position yourself.
Yeah. So I, like you said, had my own fertility issues. They were unexpected, just like
Mm,
usually they are.
yeah.
And we found out that I had endometriosis. I was completely asymptomatic my whole life, but after 3 years, because the time to diagnosis with endometriosis is
Oh, it's
usually
horrendous.
incredibly long. So it took 3 years before we figured out that I was absolutely full of endometriosis, and one of my tubes was completely blocked and fluid filled.
Yeah.
Um, so we got that resolved, and at that point, there was technically no problem anymore. And so I should have been able to get pregnant on my own, but it wasn't happening. And we went through lots of IUIs. We never tried IVF because I just wasn't ready. And it wasn't until I took a more mindful approach and I started seeing a hypnosis practitioner and going for acupuncture that I finally got pregnant after 6 years.
Wow.
And that was the moment where it started to click how much the stress impacts everything. But it actually wasn't until we were trying to get pregnant a second time that
Mm,
it fully connected with me, because I got pregnant immediately and then I miscarried immediately.
yeah.
But I thought, okay, whatever, not a problem. I got pregnant so fast. It's going to happen again. 14 months later, I was still not pregnant.
Wow.
And one day I don't know what triggered it in my mind, but I thought, I'm not doing any of the meditations. I'm not doing any of the visualizations. I'm not doing any of the things that I was doing before I got pregnant the first time.
Right.
And so I started doing them and I immediately got pregnant. And that was sort of the moment where it was like, okay, there's so much more here than the physical that goes into conceiving a child.
Right. It's such a story, and I wanted to kind of break a few things down because
Yeah.
some people don't understand the terminology. So IUI, that's the artificial insemination,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. The turkey baster.
Yeah.
As
So, it's hard because there's so many stories very similar to yourself, and you having endometriosis, like it takes such a long period of time. And speaking with lots of doctors, I think they've been telling me that the average endometriosis diagnosis takes about 7 to 8 years. That's ridiculous.
Yes, it's incredible. It's incredible, especially because so many of these women have symptoms
Yes.
that should warrant a further investigation. I mean, in my case, we had no idea, and it was a huge surprise when we figured it out. But I mean, unacceptable is sort of the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, they need better technology, I think, and quicker sort of um, obviously treatment plans, things like that. Because again, that time is so valuable, as we know as women. Like a lot of women will have their careers first or something, or they're not ready and they're wanting to have children. And like if you have to tack on extra years to sort all that out, like you're kind of on this time crunch, and that's why the stress I think comes up. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of blocks mentally. So let's kind of like unpack this for the ladies out there. So in your work, what kind of situations are you seeing coming up like on an often basis?
So, I first and foremost, women tend to come to me when they've already been on their journey for a long time
Yeah.
and they're already it's just the stress has become unbearable because why is it taking so long? um, I can't, I'm running out of money. So there's pressure there. Like, how many more cycles do I really get before
Yeah.
I'm done because I can't afford it anymore? So I see a lot of that, the sort of, I don't like the word desperation, but kind of that, like, it's become really urgent. And
Right.
what do I do? I work with many women who are dealing with secondary infertility, where they've already had one child without a problem, but now they're having trouble getting pregnant again. And sometimes we find that it's because their first pregnancy was really difficult or their first labor and delivery was
Yeah.
difficult. And your mind and body are so connected that even if you don't consciously know that you're concerned that it may happen to you again, your body can pick up on that from your subconscious mind and act on it
Right.
and protect you from that. Um, I and then I see other women who really just have no idea what might be going on. They know that there's a problem and they're starting with either IUI or in vitro fertilization, IVF, and they just feel like they need extra support.
Mm-hmm. That's quite common. And, the amount of people that I've spoken to that it is kind of the end of the cycle, like where they've gone through IVF, they've, tried the artificial insemination. It's the unbearable stress, the money. Like in Canada here,
Mhm.
it's very expensive. Like it's
Yeah.
all, most of it is out of pocket. And I've seen people spend, $20,000 to $25,000 just for one round of IVF. And these are people's like life savings, and it's quite hard, and it is quite urgent. And you mentioned sort of the secondary infertility. What you kind of experienced yourself is that, well, I'm already, I've already had children, so like this should be no problem. Like I've already gone and done this, so why now is it not working? So like you said, you kind of like dropped the ball on doing the things that you did before. And then there's other things that come up for women where they've maybe had a child and they've had a traumatic pregnancy or traumatic birth, and the body will naturally try to protect that. So you're telling yourself like, I need to get pregnant, but your body's like, but I'm protecting you because you don't want to
Right.
go through that again. So it's kind of this like push and pull.
Uh-huh.
um what have you noticed in terms of how like women are managing the stress, and what are people's coping techniques? Like what do you see people coming in doing?
So, I mean, the most honest answer is that all of us, beyond women dealing with infertility, do not do a particularly good job of managing our stress these days.
Yes.
Um, it's, I mean, we live like in an age almost where the more stress, the better. It's like a badge of honor in some cases, and it's too bad because it's not healthy. Um, but a lot of times women come to me and yeah, I walk my dog and that makes me feel good, or I go to yoga a couple times a week and I like that. But there's nobody's really got any techniques to sort of deal with present moment, like right now something has just happened to me right now and I need a way to combat the stress that I feel bubbling up inside of me.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I do. I teach little tips and tricks and techniques to
I
help mitigate that.
I would imagine sort of in those moments that women are sort of looking for, like when I hear that, I think of like breath work and
Mhm.
like
Yep,
calming the nervous system down, because it sounds like you're in this fight flight, and the body,
mhm,
when you're in this fight and flight, it is rejecting. And this is why also like we can skip periods and like things like that, even just from stress. Like
yep.
our body sort of is trying to protect us as much as possible. And it makes me think a lot about sort of the last few years and like everything that's gone on in the world. I
Mhm.
think I feel for a lot of women because going through sort of the stress already of fertility, postpartum depression, like I experienced postpartum depression myself, but being in like sort of a world where like everything is going wrong around you.
Like we all were depressed for a couple of
Yeah.
years.
And we're all kind of homebound and things like that. Like I've noticed in sort of my work is that the stress has massively increased. The anxiety has massively increased, like overall. And I feel like we're kind of like all living in this like very um anxious sort of vibration
Mhm.
where they're kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. And that is
Yeah.
a very fight and flight place. And in that sort of space, this is where people aren't losing weight. They're emotionally eating more, things like that. Their coping skills are kind of going out the window. Like I see a lot more binge eating, drinking, things like that. And like you said, sort of with the coping techniques, it's trying to sort of maybe get them more like present in like what is going on right now for you. What does stress actually do to the body in regards to fertility? So like say there's stress going on, we can talk about sort of like maybe acute stress, which is happening like right now, versus like chronic stress, which is like probably years of doing this as well.
Yeah.
How is it affecting?
So you've already mentioned fight or flight, and
Mhm.
that is an age-old mechanism that we developed as humans to protect ourselves from the dangers of, living outdoors,
Yeah.
having to grow our own food. And it has stayed with us, even though our lives look very different. And, I think most everybody understands what fight or flight is, but it basically, in response to a stressor, a danger, you either prepare yourself to fight or you got to get the heck out. The
Yeah.
car is screaming down the street toward you, and oh my gosh, I better run. All right, that's flight.
Mhm.
The bully just punched me in the face. Okay, I'm going to get ready to punch him back. There's
Right.
fight. Um, but when this mechanism is triggered, there is a whole cascade of physiological changes that happen right in the moment. One of which is that your blood flow changes. And instead of flowing sort of evenly throughout your body,
Yeah.
it is sent immediately to your really important organisms, the ones that will help you fight or flee: your lungs, your heart, your arms and legs. And everything else is left behind. Um, and ideally, once the stressor is removed, then everything reverses itself. Your relaxation
Right.
response kicks in and it rights itself. Well, with chronic stress, you remain in this perpetually hyped up state. And what your body deems the non-essential functions get shut down. And your reproductive system is at the top of the list of
Yeah.
non-essential because, you know, if there's a food scarcity, just going back to an age-old example, um, if there's not enough food for you to support a growing person inside of you, well, then we're not going to get pregnant. That's your body's going to protect you and keep that from happening. And while food scarcity, fortunately for many of us, is not an issue, your body can't tell the difference
Yeah.
between the stress of that and the stress of just your daily life. So you are not getting an adequate blood flow to your reproductive organs. Um, your reproductive hormones get shut down. Our big stress hormone, cortisol, triggers a reduction in the production of your reproductive hormones. And so you do not have enough estrogen or progesterone to really have a good cycle. And that's where we start sometimes to see problems with your menstrual cycle, problems with ovulation,
Mhm.
that will keep you from getting pregnant. Um, and then there's just the mental part of it, where chronic stress is exhausting and you feel not good. You feel not like yourself. And
Mhm.
you can, amazingly, horribly, you can put yourself into sort of a negative feedback loop where you're feeling stressed out, you're feeling not good about it. And oh my gosh, I'm still not getting pregnant. So there's more stress and it just perpetuates itself.
It does very much.
So, yeah.
And like what you said, like I was kind of writing down a few notes here when you were chatting, but the fight flight, there's also freeze as well. So
Yes.
freeze for people would be like the procrastination. So that's
Yeah.
like you're doing something at work, or you got to get something done and you know you should, but you're kind of like, but I'll, and then you're like, oh, I need to do the dishes or something. And I think that's like the
That
common
is, yeah, you're so right.
yeah, and it's definitely like it can be kind of one of three sort of things. You talked about sort of the blood flow to the organs, very that's I see this more so when women are missing periods and things like that. Like when they're really stressed out, like they've got, yeah, they've got something big coming up, they've got exams, or they've got some family issue going on, or whatever it is. Like you can literally get rid of your own period just by like
Mhm.
being super
Yep.
stressed out, because the blood flow is going elsewhere, and like you said, the your body in terms of reproduction is secondary. It's not a living organ that you need to survive. Your heart's going to get that, your digestive system's going to get that, but even in terms of digestion, when we are stressed and we're eating, we don't have a lot of blood flow in our digestive tract. So this is where I'm seeing more like leaky gut and things like that, because the blood flow is kind of like going to the extremities, and it's kind of not being put in the right place. And exactly for the same thing in terms of reproductive organs, the chronic like stress of, like you mentioned as well, not eating enough. This is also something I see common. Like it's kind of, there's twofold I find with infertility in terms of like the physical part of it is, I usually see hormones are making them very overweight and they need to get their weight down, or they're kind of on the opposite spectrum where they're not eating enough and there's not a lot of nutrients going on. So it's that the body's feeling scarce. So therefore the periods are going to be lacking, ovulation is going to be lacking. And just like I said, in terms of the last several years, like the unpredictableness of the world in general, when you have that around you and you're going out and it's kind of being reiterated to you, there is a sense that there is not safety to bring a child into this world because there is so much unpredictability going on. So that's kind of another big factor that has massively sort of, I think, impacted a lot of people. Cortisol levels, reducing reproductive hormones, like that is huge. Like I've seen so many people where they've been tested for cortisol levels, and like 9 out of 10, like so many people have high cortisol levels now. So adrenals are taxed, like, organs are starting to get taxed. And the mental energy, like you mentioned, from just like overthinking, you can be so tired just from using your brain. If there's a problem going on in your life or situation, or you're chronically stressing about the money, finances, maybe there's the other big factor too with fertility is it impacts your partnership, your marriage. That's another big factor. So if that's kind of going on over here, it's not helping the situation. So, that emotional energy is really, really draining. Um, what are some methods or advice that you can kind of give to help sort of lessen someone's stress if they're trying to get pregnant? Because, like I said, there's a variety of things that can be happening.
Yeah. So, one of the big things I would say is make sure that you've got a good support network for yourself. A sort of a compounding thing with fertility problems is that we don't really talk about them.
Yeah.
You may not tell your friends, you may not tell your family. And it's a lot to deal with by yourself, or even yourself with your partner, because um, this was my situation, and I've talked to a lot of women who feel exactly the same way. When I was going through it, it was all I could think about. Like
Yeah.
I lived it every moment of my
Hmm.
life. And my husband had limited bandwidth for it. He was wonderful. and supportive and always there when I needed him. But there were moments where he was like, I cannot. And I was
Yeah.
like, but I still am. Um, and so you have to have more people. And maybe that means going outside and finding a therapist, finding a coach. Clergy people can be good resources. Sometimes the woman at work who you're not really good friends with, who had IVF 2 years ago, turns out to be the best person for you to talk
Yeah,
to. But it's really important that you figure out who your people are and who you can lean on when you need it.
definitely.
Um, Another thing is to figure out what your true go-to relaxation thing is. And when I think when I say that, most people probably in their mind go, okay, yoga, meditation. And those are great, but they don't work for everybody and not everybody likes them.
Yeah.
It could really be going out for a walk every morning or every evening, or it could be spending a little bit of time at the gym, or it could be sitting with a book that you love that lets you sort of get out of your own mind for a
Mhm.
little while. Gardening, journaling, dancing, any of it. It's
Yeah,
just so important that you find your thing and then you do it consistently. Um,
definitely.
yeah, that's one of the biggest one of the biggest is the doing it
Yes.
consistently. And the other thing I would just say is that it's so important that you advocate for yourself and ask the questions that you have, because such a huge part of stress and worry is simply the unknown.
Mhm.
And so every every question that you can get answered that can increase what you know and calm that little part of you that's worrying about what if is good. Do it. Make sure you ask the questions that you have.
That's a lot in terms of like I it put me back to sort of the days of when I had postpartum depression with my first son. Very colicky baby, and I I'm going to go back to the beginning of what you said, the
Mhm.
support group, what you need. Like I didn't even know I was experiencing postpartum depression. Like I thought for me like this is just something that you go through, and I imagine on a fertility journey at the same time is like, well, this is just how I would be feeling, and kind of isolating yourself and not having other people to talk to. It's good to talk to your spouse obviously, but like you said, there's only so much bandwidth somebody can sort of take in a sense, and you need to have that other community. And especially being women, we're very much um, group gathering and nurturers, and we need that. And I think that sometimes we can't always find that with our partner. So a big thing I would definitely stress to a lot of the women out there that are suffering in terms of feeling really alone is to find other women, other support groups, because what you will notice, and when you get around people in the same sort of situation, is that they understand you. And that was something that like I was sort of missing, was that I felt like I was the only one out there that was experiencing this. And I was sort of just like dazed, like every day, kind of like didn't really like know how to feel, I guess. I kept getting told by society, and I'm sure in the fertility space, it's the exact same thing of, oh, you'll get pregnant and all these things, like the things that come out like, well, you got pregnant before, it'll happen again. And, I'm sure that it's hard because you get sort of told like, oh, this should be the best time of your life when you've had a baby, right? And you're
Yes.
thinking in the back of your head like, this is not what I was
This is not what I signed up for.
exactly. And you're kind of having this like completely different tape going on, and you're like, but then why do I feel so crummy? Like why do I feel this way? And on the fertility journey, it's the same thing, is that um you know I'm sure there's like, I hear this a lot. It's like I go to baby showers and see other people get pregnant super fast and quickly, and I just feel um really kind of let down by my own body and things like that. And you're kind of at this party with like a fake smile on your face, like, oh, I'm so happy, but you're really like crying
Yeah,
and upset
yeah,
inside.
absolutely.
and that's where I think the support groups, or talking to somebody like Becky who has experienced the exact same thing, fertility journeys, things like that. Like you need to have that emotional support, the stress as well. Like you said, I think even just things like drawing, painting, pets, like something that is going to help you feel better. Like you said, it's not always like go and exercise, because sometimes that kind of counteracts what they're
For some
doing.
people, it can. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And the last thing I thought about when you were speaking was the late night Googling.
Well,
Because
and I was just going to come back to that because when you said support group, I have talked to many women who think that Instagram is really sort of their support group, which is a little
yeah,
different than the late night Googling.
yeah,
But when they kind of step back, they find that it's actually increasing their stress.
yeah,
There are some great groups on Instagram who really are supportive, but there's also so much other stuff and so many images, and social media is really tricky because we've we see something and we just take it, we take it at face value, but you don't know the backstory.
yeah,
You don't know whatever else has gone on or is going on. And so it creates a lot of false expectations for people.
yeah. It's I think it's used with caution, I think, the groups, because it made me think too that when you are part of those groups as well, you can get a lot of the same sort of you can get a lot of negativity
Negative
too.
energy.
And that can also make you feel that as much as you can kind of hear those tapes, you need someone to sort of help facilitate, basically, because you want someone that's gone through it, that's like very compassionate, understanding, but you also don't want to have um, like bashing of spouses, things like that. Like I've heard a lot of that too, and it goes the wrong direction. And helping, you need to sort of help yourself first, and instead of sort of placing blame on the medical system or partners and things like that. Like that's the negative one I've noticed that doesn't help. But you need to be part of a support group in a sense that you get together and you've got someone helping facilitating it, or the one-on-one. If you are wanting to talk to somebody like Becky, where you're getting the coaching and everything, and the understanding. So I love that you came on today. Do you have any other sort of words of wisdom for these ladies that are experiencing the stress and they're in the thick of this right now?
So the big thing to always remember is that your infertility problems will not last your whole lifetime.
Yeah.
There will come an end point. Hopefully, it will be the end point that you're hoping for, that you're wanting, and you'll have a baby in your arms. That will not be the case for every last woman who is going through this. But every woman who goes through this will come out on the other side and go on to live a perfectly happy, fulfilled
Hmm.
life. It may not look the way you envisioned it growing up,
Yeah.
but I promise there is life beyond fertility.
Yeah. I think
And
that's very powerful.
yeah, one of my favorite coaching questions actually that I usually ask women in our first session together is, what would your life look like if you never had children? And that that can be a really powerful image to just sort of have in your back pocket even as you keep working toward having a baby, but to know there are all these things. For some women it's, I will travel a lot with my husband. For others it was, well, maybe I'll go back to school and do something else. I mean, there are all kinds of things
Right.
that start to come out for women when they really stop and ask. And it can just make the whole process so much more bearable when you're not hanging your hat solely on this one thing.
Right. I think that's powerful because it would be, I would imagine it'd be also very hard because it's sort of not trying to sort of imagine that that's what your life is going to be. But I think you're trying to sort of envision there is other options for you. And I don't want you to think that this is the end of the road for
Exactly.
your life, like your journey here, like the purpose of your life. So Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. Where can our listeners find you, Becky?
So the best place to find me is at my website, which is www.lilyandbefertility.com.
Wonderful. So we're going to have all of your information in our show notes. And stay tuned for our next episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a show. In good health, everybody.